what are we doing in the black community? The number one consumer of a Mercedes-Benz is us. The number one consumer of a Gucci and a Louis Vuitton, us. And they don't even advertise. Why is it that in the black community, we are always the number one consumer, but we're not the number one creators?
So you just said it, the fact that there's consumers and creators. For so long, we assume success based on consumption.
Welcome back to Closing the Gap, the truth about black wealth. Of course, I'm your host, Mr. Wilbert Hamilton, owner and founder of Hamilton Wealth Advisors. I'm here, blessed and highly favored with these wonderful gentlemen here today. I got, of course, Pastor Eddie Richardson, Bishop Ken Carter. Of course, you know, this has been a play on a number of episodes. Like I say, delayed but not denied. Like I said, it's long overdue. Been having a wonderful time. Definitely blessed to receive, what these gentlemen have been given. And I hope you're doing like me. I hope you're taking it and internalizing it and figuring out how to use it in your day-to-day life to hopefully help make you better. I'm all about, stealing as much as I can from great men, especially, men of God and men of character, and try to let some of what they got rub off on me and help make me a better person. So I hope you're doing the same. I know you're enjoying the information that we're giving. We're going to continue to give it. We just hope you continue to receive it. So with that being said, we're going to jump into a special episode today. And of course, this one is going to be a little bit interesting. Interesting to me because it's something that it's tied to some people say a sticky subject. Me being a financial advisor, I understand the trouble that people have, talking about money, the hesitancy, especially in our community, to have those conversations about, what you should do with money, how to handle money. But we all know that we love to have an opinion about what other people should do with their money. We love trying to tell people how they should spend their money and what we should do and what we shouldn't do. And, especially when we ain't earn it. We got a lot to say. When you earn it, there's a different level of appreciation for the money when you're the one actively doing the hard work and you're the one actually giving the money and, you're the true, fiduciary over those and steward over those funds. So, and that's something I wanted to touch on. And this one's going to be the church's money. I know there's a lot of questions, people saying, should you tithe, should you not tithe? Do you tithe off your gross? Do you tithe off your net? Do I tithe off my income that I report to the IRS? Do I tithe off the income I actually received that I didn't show the IRS? What are we doing here? How do we make that decision? And what are the churches doing with the money? How do they handle the money? And, one thing I can actually tell you that this wonderful gentleman to my left told me a long time ago. He said, well, you can't worry about what the church do with the money. You just got to follow God's principles to make sure you're giving the money. And if at some point in time, if you're that worried about what the church doing with the money, you might need to find a new church. But don't block your blessings by not doing what God has told you need to do and following his, I'm not going to say commandments, but his, what would be the word you'll say? His orders, so to speak. So, and also, what the difference between tithes and offering. A lot of times, we don't understand. Sometimes I think people feel like we can just get away doing a bunch of offerings on the side and don't tithe. And the offering is in addition to, it's not it doesn't take the place of the tithe. At least that's my interpretation. And, I'll let these wonderful gentlemen, of course, dive into that a little bit deeper because they can see it, from the pulpit. I ain't never had that view of it. I'm sure they have a unique perspective on the church's money. So without further ado, I want to turn it over, and I definitely want to kick to, Pastor Carter and, get his insight on, the business of church and how it really functions to help the listeners understand and better understand what their money actually goes toward.
That will has been a challenging, and I know Pastor Richardson can attest to it, because first thing they think that the pastor, if he talk about money in the church, he's stealing the church money and all that. But I'm grateful for Hamilton Wealth Advisory Group because what I've learned to do is for the church, and there's nothing wrong with investing because church has been investing. We as an African American churches have struggled because of the stigma and stereotypes that has been associated with what has transpired over the years and centuries of how people handle the money in the church. But it's critical. Now, one thing I do, and I, as we'll handle my church, the finance, is we're not in anything aggressive. The board, I got a board of trustees and staff, deacons, and them. I've got that. We all, and so, but I'm very conservative, and I express the will that, hey, now once we get to a certain point, then we'll do moderate. But I would never, with the church money, I would never be in anything aggressive. I've heard of some situations that have happened to some well-known pastors, and they was in some things that was too aggressive for the church. And when the loss occurred, it can do something to you when you have to deal. So what I've always in my mind when it comes to handling the church money, being some conservative, moderate. I would never go no further, and then I would leave that up to Hamilton Advisory Group anyway, to which direction. He may need to say stay conservative. He may say, okay, let's do this at some point, but even me myself, besides church, as I get older, I don't have the recovery time, so I'm very cautious now how I do things now. So, and need to be putting more money aside than what I'm putting out. If I can, Pastor Rich know that the people that we done helped, we can get some of the money back we done spent in helping folks. Oh Lord, I'm telling you, but don't take chances with God's money. Tithing, that 10 cent and offering. A lot of people struggle to pay tithing. Tithing is a principle, a divine principle that people think is only for the Old Testament, but is relevant even here in the of this day and time. If you want to see a financially blessed person, not just a person with money, a financially blessed, a blessed person, because it's one that is a giver and pay their tithe. All the Lord wants is that dime. The reason why we struggle to pay tithe, sometimes we struggle with that 90 cent. And so when we don't do, he let us keep 90 cent. All he wants is a dime out of a dollar. And the way God got it set up don't even look like it's fair, the way he does it. But we oftentimes struggle with the 90 cent. And so if I struggle with the 90 cent and not be a good steward over the 90 cent, I'm gonna keep that 10 cent, keep the whole dollar instead of giving God a dime. But tithing is a very, very good principle. It really don't look like it's fair. It don't even look like it's fair with God. Just give me a dime now. Now offering is what you want to give me, but that dime, just give me a dime out of a dollar. You keep 90 cent and just give me a dime. And you watch God, how God bless you, your finance. And open up doors of avenues of finance. But most people that struggle to pay tithing, they are struggling with that 90 cent. That 90 cent is where the issue is at. So sometimes they didn't do right with the 90 cent, so they have to just keep the whole everything instead of giving God his part.
We ain't gotta have the original come to Jesus beat.
Exactly. So but
come to Jesus and get yourself together spiritually leads to you being able to get yourself together financially. They kind of work hand in hand. And I'm gonna put my financial advisor hat on for a second before I turn it over to your brother. Yes, something that Ken touched on that I think is very valuable, and I think a lot of people receive this information. We got a lot of people that sit on boards for foundations, churches, organizations, and whatnot that do collect money. I'm gonna give you a little piece of wisdom from me in this situation from a professional standpoint. Every organization should have what's called an investment policy statement. And that investment policy statement says what a financial advisor or investment advisor, who you'll be working with, that's managing your money, it says what they should and, more importantly, should not be doing with those funds, how the funds can and will be invested. That way you have a record. That way you have a signed off on document saying what he or she should be doing and should not be doing. That way you have some accountability. You're not turning over, you don't want to turn over what's called discretionary authority to an investment advisor or a financial advisor for them to make the sole decision at their discretion as to how you want the money invested. Because if their personal goals and beliefs don't align with the organization's goals and beliefs, that can lead to a situation where they can be overly aggressive, or it could even be a situation where they're underly conservative based on the outcome and goal and objective with these funds. So first and foremost, just free piece of game. Every organization, and even you individually, because it's something I do for everybody I work with, you want to have what's called an investment policy statement. That basically says how we're going to invest the money. That says what we can do and what we can't do. That way you have something that gives structure and accountability that says we don't want to go outside of these boundaries. Like Bishop Carter said, we're going to have, we want to be moderate, we're conservative to moderate, we don't want to go above that. Well, in that investment policy statement, it says that explicitly that we don't go outside these guidelines. We're going to color within these lines. Now, we can color within these lines all we want, but we're not going to color outside these lines. And if someone does color outside these lines, having that investment policy statement now provides you with some accountability and reconciliation opportunities if someone does make a mistake. But if you don't have that and you've turned over sole discretionary authority, then you're at the beck and the call of whatever they want to do and whatever results they can or cannot provide. So that's just my I had to throw my financial advisor hat on for a second. I did want to give y'all a little free game. I don't do it a lot because you should have to pay for that information because it ain't free. But in this case, I'm gonna give it to you for free before we jump into our regular scheduled programming and get back to the church's money. I did want to give you all that. So, Brother Richardson, we do want to turn it over to you to kind of talk about, the purposes behind tithing, the biblical principles, and how you feel about it, just from a church standpoint and from a pastoral view.
Thank you. I think to what you just gave is that tithing is God's investment policy for us. He has laid out the same way you said, on boards and everything, you need an investment policy statement. And God has provided that for us. It is a way God has invested in us. God is not has. God is constantly investing in us as God's creation. Everything that we have has come from God. Every dime, every penny, every blessing, financially, spiritually, everything we have comes from God, the Father of lights. And His investment policy for us is, hey, show me how responsible will you be with what I have given you. And you're not paying God, you are just respecting God for what God has provided. So that's how I look at tithing. As Bishop Carter stated, it's a that godly biblical principle that we abide by and we live by. And as he said, it's kind of unfair, it seems like, right? When you think about it, we still receive the most benefit out of it. And many times, what we see of giving, keeping 90% and giving 10%, the part that we really can't calculate is what percentage of that 10% comes back, pressed down, shaken together, running over the 90% that we kept. That's the part that we never equate. We like to count what we gave, but man, it's so hard to try to count your blessings. And so we are tremendously blessed by what God gives, and it is our responsibility to show that we believe in God and respect God for what God does for us. Now, we can't pay God for anything. But what we can do is demonstrate a tremendous amount of respect for what God has given by being obedient to what He has asked us to do. It's just like a parent and a child. The parent says, "Hey, clean up your room," and usually the child gets upset because the child doesn't want to take that responsibility, or wash the dishes, and the child gets upset because the child doesn't feel like they should have to wash the dishes. But in cleaning up the room, all the parent is saying is that, look, I'm paying for the house, the bills, and everything. Everything that you have thrown around in that room, I bought it.
Yeah.
And all I'm asking you to do is just keep it organized.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? When I asked you to come and clean up the kitchen, I bought the food, bought the dishes, and I cooked the food. All I'm trying to do is for you to just show by doing what I asked you to do and cleaning the kitchen, you're just showing a small amount of respect for what you're receiving. And when we take that approach, then I think we'll be better. We'll be better, and we won't have so many gripes when we realize how tremendously blessed we are. When we start trying to at least try to count those blessings, we will stop complaining about what God is doing. So tithing, that's biblical principle, God's investment policy. A requirement that God has, just to show an amount of respect for God, and it's important for us to practice that, because once we do that, to Bishop Carter's point, we'll then start taking care of the 90% better. We'll manage it better, and do what's needed to be done with that. Then the other thing, lastly, that I'll say is, oftentimes we don't really pay attention to, when you pay a tithe to church, very seldom do people really take into account all that the church really does for the community and its people. They always want to look at the preacher, the pastor, and what they're driving and how they're dressed, and and yes, there have been some within our ranks that have violated God and violated God's people. So some of that gripe is understandable. But I dare say that the majority of pastors and churches are really doing right by God's money, and they're utilizing it to really care for the community.
Yeah, you know what? I'm glad you said that, because that's something I definitely want to jump into, and definitely in great detail. But I just want you all to make sure that you all caught what he threw. First thing that he said, that it just gave me a different perspective in the time we've been sitting here and I've just been listening to it for the last 5 minutes, is perspective. The perspective of him relating the investment policy statement to God's principles on tithing as his investment policy statement with us. Just you saying that has given me a different perspective on my own and how I should look at that. And because one thing I was, thinking about, as we talked I talked a few minutes ago about having an investment policy statement that every organization and individual should have when they're investing. But also, of course, if you work within an organization, you're now a fiduciary. You are, legally obligated to work in the best interests of the organization, handling the money, and if you have fiduciary responsibility, that means you have, you also can be legally liable in certain situations for the mismanagement of the money. But the biggest thing that I took out of it, I want to make sure you at home receive, is that just that biblical principle that he just laid out, and having a better understanding of how it relates to us, and making sure that, the same way you want to hold me accountable, if you're working with me and I'm managing your money, God is holding you accountable through his biblical principle as well. And if you're a fiduciary over at an organization working on the board, you also have to look at it as the money that God is blessing you with. You're a fiduciary over that for God, and making sure you give him that 10% when he bless you with the 90%. So without further ado, we'll be back in a minute. Welcome back to Closing the Gap, the Truth About Black Wealth. Of course, I'm your host, Mr. Wilbert Hamilton, here with the wonderful brothers, Bishop Ken Carter, Brother Eddie Richardson. Been having an amazing time. Definitely been, as we got into the church's money and how we're all fiduciary and stewards over the blessing that God has given us, and we all owe God that 10%. We just got to make sure we, get more grounded spiritually in our daily walks so we can become better stewards over the funds that he give us, so we can make sure we can give him that 10%, and we're not living on the whole 100. So, the goal should be to live on 50, get God 10, and now you got some extra to play with, not to live on 100, and you ain't got nothing for God, and you wonder why you can't continue to receive no blessing, when you ain't gave God nothing for him to give you nothing back. So you got to give to get. We're all blessed to be a blessing, so we're just taking that into consideration. But, when talking about the church's money, it's something that I've, it's bothered me in different instances. And probably because of what I do for a living, I see the disparity and the wealth gap between African Americans and, other races and nationalities. I see the differences in how they view wealth. I see the differences in the trust that they have within each other. I tell people all the time, I say, I'm not a big fan of diversity and inclusion. When I see a company say they got a diversity and inclusion program, what you're telling me is you really had a problem. Because if you didn't have a problem, you wouldn't need a diversity and inclusion program. You'd already been inclusive. If the best man or woman was getting a job from the beginning, you probably wouldn't have no issues. So that's number one for me. But also is that, I don't like how we grew up in our church. Because we wasn't at their church 30 years ago. I'm just gonna give it to you real right now. I ain't gonna say we wasn't allowed, but they always said the most segregated time in this country was on Sunday morning. White churches and black churches. We wasn't churches, like I said, the integrated schools, but the integrated churches. That came much later. And what I always tell people, because I have people ask me all the time, me being a financial advisor, and I'm talking with other organizations, other wealth management companies and whatnot, and they always ask me, Will, how can we, how do we close the wealth gap? How do we do this, and do that? I'm like, really? Until other races look at me and don't see what color I am and are willing to do business with me, there will always be a disparity. Now, me, myself, I focus on taking care of the people that look like me because those are the people most likely to come work with me. I understand it. That's just me being a realist and being a human and living in this world and understand that, things are the way they are and I can't control them. But at the same time, in order for things to truly become equal and have equality, I need a white man or woman to look at me and say, you know what? I want to work with him because he's good at what he does. Until we do that, until that happens, it will not be equal. Because I got enough trouble getting the people that look like me to look at me and say, well, he's knowledgeable and he's trustworthy enough and he's respected enough and he has enough credentials and education and everything else to be able to help me financially. So we already struggle from trust within our own community. But we know we struggle from trust from other communities. Because other communities that really set the blueprint of how we should operate anyway. They take care of themselves first. And they help everybody else later. Asians, Mexicans, Caucasians, everybody except for us. We take care of everybody else before we take care of ourselves. We love to feel accepted. We want to feel wanted and needed, and we want approval from other communities in far too many ways. And we're seeking that approval, and we want their head nods, their pat on the back, their attaboys. And I'm like, well, why do you need that? What does it do for you? Now, in saying that and how it relates to the church's money, we have a situation here where, I grew up in the black church. And I think most of us did. Yes. I've watched people not give a dime to their church, but get to become grown and have their own jobs, and they venture out to these other churches that have all the glitz and glamour, have all the bells and whistles, have all the programs and resources, and they give them their 10% plus. And I always look at it, I'm like, well, you ain't give your church a dime to put a new doorknob on, but you'll go to their church and give them everything they ask for and then some. You'll give them your time. You'll give them your money. You'll give them your kids. You'll give them everything that you got to be affiliated with them. And you're doing it because they look like they got it together. And it's the same thing I tell people, you know, from a business standpoint. I said, well, if you was giving me all your money, I'd pay to go get a nice shiny building too. If I had all your money and the resources from my community coming to me, I could afford to have 10 locations. But we don't support our own, but we quick to run across town and support people that don't look like us and then don't support us. And the only initiatives they have are hand-me-downs. It's we're going to do a give back to this community. We're going to do a outreach program to this community. No. When we going to are they pouring real resources into this community? Now, I ain't going to say the name of the church because that's being a little petty. That's being a little, that could be a little touchy. So and it's not about that, but it rubs me the wrong way when I watch these organizations, I watch these churches specifically that have come out and they have leaders in their organization that have directly tied themselves to people who are white nationalists, people who have, racist backgrounds and ideologies, but we want to sit up in there with them on Sunday and we're praising the Lord and giving them our tithes and offering to support their program. I'm like, they don't need your support. Your church that groomed you to the point where you got to be grown enough to make a conscious decision of what change you want to make. Well, did you give anything back to them? Because they raised you. Good, bad, and different. If you might not have had everything you wanted, but obviously you had everything you needed because you got to this point in life. And I just wish that we would kind of turn around and look and give back to our own first. Not saying you can't support other people. Not saying, because I'm a firm believer, and we talked about it, I think, in the last episode, I'm a firm believer in working with professionals. I'd never tell you to work with a person based on skin color if you sacrifice the service. If a person can't do the job, they can't do the job regardless of what color they are. So I'm not a fan of saying, hey, work with me because I'm black. No. Work with me because I'm the best at what I'm doing. I just happen to be black. That's the attitude that I have. So it's not about not patronizing other people in other organizations and other churches. But my thing is, I would just want us to look internally first and look at home first. What can we do, or what have you done to make your situation better where you could actually make real impact? Because I see us losing an identity because we don't pray the same. We don't worship the same. And obviously because we don't have the same wants, goals, and needs. I ain't never been to a Caucasian church. But just from what I've seen, it's a different feel. It's a different vibe. It's a different level of understanding what I need. When I say I need a miracle, I mean I need a miracle. When we saying, Lord, I need you to bless me with this job opportunity, we saying, Lord, I'm really looking for you to bless me because there's nobody in my community that has the resources a lot of times to be able to give me that blessing. So we are directly looking to God to pour into us, and we're really looking and we need God. In their communities, because they have resources, I'm not saying they don't love God the same way we do. I'm saying that there's a different level of passion from the standpoint of what they need. Because with my cousin, with my uncle, with my brother, with my next door neighbor, when the church that I go to, when the schools that I go to have people with resources that I can call and say, hey, I need help, I need this, I need that, and they can provide that for you, you ain't looking to God the same way I'm looking to God. Because we ain't got those people in our community that can give that to us. So we really looking for God to make it happen for us. We really need God. This is why we pray so much during slavery. Why do we pray so much in the civil rights? Because we needed God to make a way out of no way. Literally. We didn't see no other way we could make it besides that. They've never been in that position to where they needed God to make a way for them. They say, you know what, if you work hard and do what you're supposed to do, your opportunities are gonna come. You can be black and that opportunity will never come. You're only as great as your opportunities. There's nobody on this earth, I don't care how gifted, talented, or skilled you are in any profession, job, or whatnot. If someone does not provide you with the opportunity to exercise, utilize, and display their gift, skill, or talent, nobody will ever know. That is what we suffer from in our community. That's why I'm a big proponent of ownership. Why I'm a big proponent of going it not on your own, but within our own. Because we need that. Because for me, I have people ask me all the time, what's your number? How much would you sell your company for? What's your goal? What are you trying to accomplish? What are you trying to do? And they say, would you sell it for this amount of money? I'm like, there's no such thing as a number. It's not a number. I said, for me, this is a passion. I want to have something. I have 3 sons. I have a friend who has multiple daughters. You have kids and grandkids. I want to be able to say, you know what? I can provide a job opportunity to people that look like me that I know need opportunities. Ain't nobody offer me no job opportunity coming out and say, hey, come be a financial advisor. I stumbled into this on accident and God put me here for a specific purpose and a reason. So for me, it just bothers me and it kind of rubs me the wrong way a little bit because I see it and I guess I feel it because I see so many different ends of it. Because I'm a financial advisor and I see the monetary discrepancy between the races. I see the financial literacy gap that we have between cultures and communities. And so when I see us elevate to assimilate, it just bothers me. And I'm like, well, it's only hurting our community more and more. And it's creating a hole that we just can't get out of. So I'm going to get off my soapbox now because I just had to get that off my chest because it's been bothering me for a minute. And like I say, these brothers are my therapists, my spiritual counselors. So, we still talking about the church money. And I'm very frank and very direct, and that's my belief. I know some of y'all go to the church on the other side of town, to each his own. I ain't got nothing against you. I love you. But just, I would ask you what are you giving back to your church? And people always say, well, my church ain't doing right with the money. Well, ain't nobody say you had to stay at that black church. There's a number of black organizations, institutions that are doing the right thing, that have outreach programs, that have different ministries set up. So there are other places you can go. The same way you went across town and found that one, you could have went down the street and found another one. So with that being said, I want to turn it over to y'all brothers and tell me, y'all opinion on, about the business of church. And I think this will help, maybe provide some clarity to those people that maybe were thinking about going across town or went across town. Give them some insight, Ken, into what happens with the church money and what is it utilized for. Because I think sometimes that can be a misconception as to, what the church is actually doing with the money. Like, Brother Richard said, the church is doing a lot. They got a lot on their back. They're taking on a whole lot more than most people realize. And I think maybe if they better understood all the responsibilities that was on a person, it can help give them maybe a different perspective that may lead to a different outcome in how they choose to view things. So,
oftentimes people fail to realize the church have expense. It costs to the lights, lights have to be paid, if you're buying a property and stuff, things like that have to be paid and taken care of, besides just the outreach, the building upkeep. I'm seeing now in time past, Pastor Richardson will, and I know Pastor Richard can attest because being a pastor, you used to could get people to volunteer to do things in the church now, but you practically now to get people to do things now, you just about have to pay and compensate everybody do things. You gotta pay compensate the sound man. One playing the drums got to be compensated. It just people clean up the church in time past. And when I was younger in the church, we were glad to do those things. But now you just about have to compensate everybody. So when people look at the necessity of tithing and offering, it goes deeper than just taking care of the pastor. There's a lot of overhead. Insurance. Church have to have insurance. gotta have some insurance, especially your church. The bus, you got a bus, a van, they gotta be insured. So it's so much. They think that it's just about the pastor. No, you may want to invest in some property, invest in the different outreaches. It calls. Just last Saturday, my kids, we got the buses, but they went to the pumpkin patch. The kids, stuff like that have to be, things have to be taken care of. I know the parents do so much, but then the church, people light bill. People come to the church to get help and assistance with their light bill, with the gas bill, and I'm gonna be honest. It hurt me to say this too. A lot of the time, be the ones we have to help that done mismanage that 90%. But we still help people. Help all. We do. We give. My church, we network with other ministry. I've learned that if we can't do something, network and partnering with other ministries and stuff. I learned that we give donations and different things and to other ministries that are doing what we are not able to do. So, and especially if you can't be there hands on, but there is what I'm seeing now as a pastor of this day and time. There is a discrimination within the African American church that I'm seeing, because most people feel a validation, because this church is big and then all this and the big size, and you got all these members over there, and they feel the validation of going there and stuff. And one thing I've learned, we've gotten healed from the physical part of slavery, but the mental part of slavery still affects black people in general, and so it affects us not only in our individual life, our family life, our church life, because we feel a validation by me going to the big church over there. We feel a validation. I feel like I'm validated. And the sad part about it, I've noticed, because going around and seeing being in a lot of different settings, oftentimes you're just a number there. And it look good, I'm there, but oftentimes you're just a number and not really getting what you thought that you was going to get from that particular setting.
Yeah, well, I can speak to that first and foremost. I'm a person where if the pastor don't know my name, I probably ain't coming back to the church. I want the people. I want a relationship.
Yes, exactly.
I want somebody that knows me well enough to be able to tell when something is off with me that can pour into me. And I think that's what most people are missing. They don't have that accountability.
That's what the word
and
right
they
there.
It used to be that pastor knew you, to know your mama, the daddy.
Yeah.
They know how you are, they know your character, so when something is off, they can feel it. And they can pour into you, at the drop of a hat. And I feel like we don't have enough people that are in places where they can be poured into and get what they need, which led to what we talked about some of the other episodes where we're seeking that advice from and looking to other mediums. And those are things that I'm glad we're going to talk about, and we're going to talk about more about them in just a minute. Back at it in a second. Being in the business for almost 2 decades, I've experienced and know what truly works and creates longevity and success for our clients. We have developed great understanding and insight into what our community is looking for and expecting in a professional financial advisor. We believe that the client always comes first because we're in the service business, not the sales business. We have a structured process that creates a predictable, reliable, and relatable result. Please join us in helping to close the gap in our community. Feel free to contact us at www.hamiltonwealthadv.com and also at 205-600-4754 for more information.
I just want to say that oftentimes what affects our churches is that we want to see things and want things that happen within our individual lives and in our family life, but we won't get involved. Families now, couples, they won't bring the kids to church, you know. Then you're wondering why, and where I heard Will say, train up a child in the way they should go when they're old, they won't depart from it. You got to get them in that setting. I remember coming to Sunday school, being in the Bible class, and because if you don't get those kids involved in that church setting like that, the gang's gonna teach them, the world's gonna attract them, and they're gonna be lured and enticed to do other things. So oftentimes we put the blame within the say church itself, but are you really actively doing what you need to do? Bringing your kids, getting them involved, you yourself, parents, and I even on my own, with my own grandkids, I have to be very cautious about these iPads and stuff, because now they are babysitting our kids for us and training them.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, and that's definitely true. I agree with that, Bishop Carter, and I think to some of the things that you all touched on. We're talking about church, we're talking about money. I want to go back to that accountability piece. I think that's where we end up losing some of our people, going to other places to go to church and not we are not taking personal accountability for where we have received our grounding, foundation, and training. We end up reaching a level of success, and then because we had some trouble along the way and some issues that we're still wrestling with, we end up putting more credence on the struggles that we went through, that we don't really take good value to the strengths that it produced in us.
exactly.
We've reached a certain plateau in our life and in our various fields of study and jobs and careers, and we then look down on how we got there, and therefore that's why we start searching for something different than what actually enabled us to get to where we are. And so I think that's what speaks to the issue that you're talking about, where some of our own successful people within our ranks and our ethnicity end up joining into other churches, is because of that. We don't want to take that personal responsibility to make sure that our ministries continue to grow. And I think that's why we do not have as many African American ministries and churches in some of these more prominent neighborhoods, is because we're not galvanizing together to bring and build what we need there. Right? You look across everywhere, you have the other ethnicities that had churches in these prominent areas, but for us, we end up assimilating into theirs and not advocating and saying, hey, you know what, I need my own. And I'll close it with this to that end. I think the biggest problem, the biggest issue to why we have that is a lack of knowledge. Scripture says my people perish because of lack of knowledge. And the lack of knowledge that I speak to in that is we have failed to learn the history of our plight in the black church, of how it came to be. If our people would take the time and really learn and see how the so-called uneducated African American that was enslaved built a relationship with God in the dark, in the quiet, couldn't read the Bible, but they heard from God clearly, and as a result of hearing from God, they fought to have their own sanctuaries to worship, because they knew they could not worship with the slave master. because they even said it when you look in the history of the church. They talked about the fact that the same God that I'm praying to, Master ain't praying to that same God. And you spoke to that a minute ago. That the same that preacher, yeah, they not praying. It's God, but they ain't praying to the same God. It's a different need.
Yeah.
You know, you spoke to that. It's a different need that we have. And when you get down into it and you research and you find that history, you'll have more value to how the church that you grew up in or that your ancestors grew up in, why it's where it is and why it's what it is. Then you'll hold yourself personally accountable to advocate to have a church in the prominent neighborhoods where you live. You'll fight for that because your ancestors fought for that. They didn't just, you know, when we go into African Methodism and you deal with Bishop Allen, and they went to the church and they helped them build this new wing on the church. And then when the Sunday when that wing, that upstairs part opened up that Sunday, all the white people that was in the church said that, okay, y'all didn't realize it, but y'all go up there and we gonna stay down here, you know. And as he was on the altar praying, they was like, no, you gotta get up off this altar right here. We didn't build this altar for you. Yeah, we've been going to church with you, but we didn't build it for you. You know, you helped build it, but it's not for you. This part is for us, and that part is for you. And as a result, they got out of there. And until we have one of those type moments, we won't realize that we need to get out of there. Now, you can still be cordial. They still, you know what I'm saying, and still in a relationship. But the understanding that you speak of that, hey, it's not the same God. You have a different set of needs than others do. And you respect others for what they need, but you need to take care of your own as well and be accountable. And when you do that, you will make your money count for more by doing so. Yeah.
One thing I say, you know, my dad talked a long time ago, there's no relationship without reciprocation. So you in a relationship with them, like Bishop said, like Pastor said, but, you know, is it really a relationship? You know, you giving to them what are they giving back? You know, I don't look at things and say, you know, my father told me, he said, you know, never look at what somebody else is giving compared to what you give, because it's all in relation to what they have. If you make $10,000 and somebody else is making $100, if both of y'all give 10%, y'all gave equal value based on what you had. So never look at because you giving more or somebody else is giving less and judge them based on that. Judge them based on we're all giving according to what we can afford to give. And I just look at it from the standpoint of, you know, like you said, we're giving to those organizations, and the give back is not the same. You know, and something else you spoke of, and something I came to the realization of, and something I accepted, was that when I started working, started my company, started building, I told myself, I said, you have to be okay not seeing what your kids and your grandkids see. And I asked myself, I said, am I okay if I don't see big in that status? If I don't see it, but my kids see it times 10. And I told myself, you know what? I'm okay with that. Because it ain't like God let me starve. You know, I still do all right. I mean, he's still taking care of me. You know, but if I can lay the path and the foundation, and now I have multiple sons who can pick up and hold the baton and run forward, well, and one day they can look up, you know, long after I'm gone, and what they passed on to their grandkids and what we built, I'm okay with that. You know, I'm okay with not seeing everything, but as long as I lay the foundation on what it become, and that's why I have an issue a lot of times, and with certain individuals, they, you know, when everything becomes, you know, all about money, and because we live in a capitalist society, I see, in my opinion, I feel like too many people in our community, you know, use capitalism as an excuse. I'm not a believer that a black man can be completely capitalist in this world, in this society, because you're going to alienate and obliterate too many people in your community along the way. I do feel like we have a social obligation, to help the people that look like us, because we have been so taken advantage of, and we are so disenfranchised from the standpoint, and all of it comes back down to the economic disparity, and never getting our 40 acres and a mule from the beginning. And that's just a piece of it. We can go back, further than that, So I take it, and that's why I'm so big on. I don't like to see guys sell their business, because I hear people all the time, especially in the popular culture, they'll say, "I want to run up the bag. I'm gonna build up the company. I'm gonna flip it. I'm gonna sell it, and I'm gonna make my money and go." But we always selling back to the people that don't look like us, because they got the money to buy it. But we never take the time to take a step back and look and see, how did they get there? They got there by not selling. Louis Vuitton, Moet Hennessy, LVMH. We know that. We support that company. They bought, 50% of, JD vodka. Jay-Z champagne. Now, it wasn't that it wasn't a bad business deal for him. It was a great business deal for him. And I even have come to understand his point of view from it on certain things. And everybody's entitled to their own opinion. But I'm always of the mindset, because we don't have in our community, we need a foundation in every area of business, in every trade, in every aspect of life. We need a foundational company. The same way other communities have a foundational company in every area of business. We need that. So when I see a sale, and yeah, you made a bunch of money, you got a windfall, and it was great for you and maybe your kids, but I'm thinking about my personal mission and motto is, I want to touch people I never come into contact with. That's my personal motto, so to speak. Like, my company motto is, want to teach people how to create generational wealth. But my personal motto is, I want to touch people I never come into contact with. And if I can do that, if I can lay the blueprint and lay the groundwork, and my sons can come along, and their sons and daughters can come along and turn into, Hamilton Wealth Advisors, into what you see. What is Morgan Stanley? What is Merrill Lynch? These are all people.
Right.
They had to start somewhere. Yeah. And they started generations ago, and they laid the foundation and the blueprint on how to get to a certain point. All these big companies had to start somewhere, and they started multiple generations ago. And those people lived well doing it.
Right.
But they didn't see the billions and trillions that was going to come behind them. Yeah. But they were okay laying the foundation and saying, you know what, if I don't cash out on everything, it's okay, because I'm leaving it better than I found it. Because when I got it, it didn't exist. I had to create it. So for me to think that I'm going to be able to see what my sons are going to see, when I'm hoping they get 50 years that I don't see, after I'm gone, it would be foolish. Because my job is, I want to put my sons in a situation where they can be better than me. My whole goal in life, and I say it a lot of times, that I've been blessed with a lot of great, men that have come into my life along the way. But I always say, my father is the greatest man to me that ever walked next to Jesus, because of what he put in me. And my job is to level up what he did. And I feel like I'm on my way doing that. He didn't have the foundation that he gave me. I'm hoping to give my sons the foundation that he couldn't give me. Because I can take what he got and I can add to it. And hopefully I can give my sons everything that he got from me. And they can take everything that they're going to get from me, and they can pass it forward even more. So we continue to elevate along the way, but doing it in a way where you appreciate and you are in love with self first, not self-hate. Because we have too much of that going on in our community, where we elevate to a point where we want to disassociate from the people that look like us, when in reality, those are people that can only be there for us in the end. See you next time.